good. Ian Daniel. I am the head of department of the Labor Studies Department at Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, and I want to welcome you to the Labor Studies one-on-one discussion this evening. It's good to have you here on this rainy afternoon. I thank you for being here. I'm sure that there were other things that you could have been doing, and you've chosen to share your time with us here tonight. At first, I wanted to discuss the Labor Studies Department and what we were offering, but it's probably going to be a little bit boring, so I decided to go a different direction. And I want to discuss with you instead some of the contemporary issues in work and in the workplace that we are experiencing today that demonstrates the importance of doing what we do in our department. Now, before we start, I want to warn you, I live with a dog. His name is Bruce Wayne, and he has a tendency to make noise every time he knows I'm on the phone or in a virtual meeting. So if you hear him barking, well, you know, that's just the price of working from home under these conditions. All right, so let's start by talking about the centrality of work in life today. If you're like me and you're in your late 30s, 40s, or 50s, I won't tell you which category I'm in because I look really good for my age. You will have recognized that you have already spent more time in work than in any other aspect of your life. And this captures the idea of how important work is in our lives. We will spend, by the time we retire, and sometimes even after we retire, more time working than doing almost anything else. And on cue, you hear Bruce going here. All right. Work is very important in our lives. Work is very important in societies. Work often becomes a part of determining our identity. We know who we are based on what we do in many instances. I remember in some of my misspent youth, I would be in different social places, pubs, clubs, you know, rum shops, and look at the glee with which people will pull out their business cards to say, hey, look, this is me. I work here, I work there. This is what I do. Work becomes wrapped up in our sense of who we are, in our sense of self-worth, in validating who we are. So work becomes very important to us in terms of our being. It's material, yes, we earn income. We earn income that allows us to live, but it goes much further than just the money that we get at the end of the month or the end of the fortnight or the end of the week or the end of the day. It also says, this is who I am to many people and to ourselves. And more than that, work is at the intersection of our lives and so many other aspects of our society. Work determines our ability to take part in different parts of our society because, yes, we have to earn and we have to buy access to so many different parts of our society. Carnival, you have to buy access to a carnival band. You have to buy access to the Fed circuit. You know, you have to buy the clothes. You have to work determines your ability to do this. You know, there was a time that going to the cinema, well, before COVID, was something that you could do cheap. Now going to the cinema is like, you know, a big chunk of change for not just the ticket, but when you get to the concession, you see what they do you for popcorn and a soft drink. So work determines your ability to fit into many of these things, and not just leisure, but practical. How do you go to a doctor? How do you license a vehicle? Work becomes tied up into several things that we have to do on a daily basis, and then eventually you have to retire. And your ability to retire and to live in retirement depends in large part on what you did for a living and how much you've earned. So much of your life experience actually passes through the experience of work, not to mention the fact that many of us have met our significant other or others at work, which, if you consider how much time you spend in work, is not surprising at all. So work is one of these pivotal spots in society that not only determines our life and the possibilities of our life, but when you add up all of the lives, work determines the very nature of the society itself, what the society is like, how good is the society as a place to live. And if you want to look at that, look at the countries that constantly come at the top 10 of best places to live. And then look at the kinds of work relationships and the relationships that come out of work, especially those kinds of things that are dependent on taxation that you have in those societies. And you see there the direct relationship between how you work and what the society, the shape that the society takes. And my dog is now playing with his squeeze toy. Hold 1 second. I muted my mic to take the squeeze toy away from my dog, and I forgot to unmute. Hold 1 second for me, please. Yes, so the best laid plans of mice and men always go asunder. So yes, we are back once again. So I think the last thing that I may have been saying that you heard, that where you may not have heard, was the idea of the reciprocal relationships between the nature of society and the possibilities of life in that society as they pass through work. And as a consequence of that, what we study in all of the various disciplines in labor studies is the political economy of a society. Now, the political economy, to understand that, political economy kind of refers to the way that intersection between politics and economics in terms of determining what resources are created in a society and then how they are distributed, to whom they're distributed, the priorities in that society. And what's important to understand there is that politics is also social. And by that we mean that people make political decisions. And that suggests that we make deliberate choices about what we do and how we do it and how it affects the society that we live in. Now, very often people end up saying that, it's a system, it's suggesting that the society we live in really doesn't give choices. But well, that's not exactly true. What you have over time is that the choices that we make become habit, and over more time, the habits that we make become understood as culture. And so we keep replicating these kinds of behaviors, these kinds of choices that we make, and it feels like an iron cage that, okay, I really can't do anything different. This is how it has to be. But that's not true. All culture persists and changes over time. For instance, Calypso gave way to soca, Sparrow gave way to Marsha Montano and Bunji Garlin, which means that what we become over time is subject to change, and more importantly, is subject to intentional choices. So like studying these kinds of relationships, work and society, politics, economics, sociology, all of the culture, all of these things help us to develop the ability to determine where our society is going, and not just to become, almost victims of an irresistible direction of our society, where we have no ability to move it in one direction or another. So with that as a kind of basic background, let's look at a couple of issues that are important in the study of, in the disciplines of industrial relation, of labor studies. And I said industrial relations here because I deliberately don't want to talk about industrial relations tonight. Everybody thinks when they hear labor studies that, okay, what we're going to do there is industrial relations. But industrial relations is actually one area, an important area, yes, but one area of labor studies and not the only area of labor studies. More importantly, many of the other areas of labor studies become important in informing industrial relations as practice, and informing the ability to understand industrial relations. Because to understand industrial relations, you have to understand the context within which it is taking place, the things that are affecting how industrial relations work. So let's look at some of the topical issues. And the first one I want to look at is what has come to be referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. And to do that, I just want to share a picture here on the screen with you. And so you see people talking about there being four industrial relations in history between the late 1700s and today. The first industrial revolution was one that was created by steam power mostly, and mechanization. And if you used to watch a lot of TV like me, then you can think of in industrial England, the Artful Dodger, you know, that kind of grimy black period with chimney sweeps and child labor and female labor and big machinery. That was the first area, the first era of industrialization, which actually moved the production of goods into early factories. And what's interesting about that is that there really wasn't an awful lot of technology used there. One of the main things in making that system, that more productive system of making things, was literally streamlining production, putting one aspect here and then another aspect after that and another aspect after that, and creating the basics of an assembly line. Later on, you would have mass production, the ability to make large amounts of goods to serve markets, and that would happen close to 1900, and that was powered by electricity. And so now you have the beginnings of the modern day factory. Then the next level of that was the thing that happened just the other day for some of us, where we saw the advent of computers into the workplace, and many of us were afraid of these computers with the green screens and strange language, was going to take all of our jobs. And so you had globalization becoming a very important part of that. And now what we're talking about today, the fourth industrial revolution, is a progression on that idea, and that refers to artificial intelligence, big data, where what you're going to have is computerization being able to take over production to the point where it not only knows what to do, it knows when to do it, where to do it, why to do it, and it can displace a whole lot of people in the production system. What's interesting about this? Well, there are several things that are interesting here. One is that people are saying, well, the robots are coming to take our jobs. And to be honest with you, there's almost nothing that can't be computerized in this day and age. But there are things that you have to think about. One is that if you look at where we live, we have places in this country, and this is one of the most developed countries in the Caribbean, if not in Latin America as well. There are many places where electricity is still an issue, where phone lines are still an issue. And that means that there are some places in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago where we aren't even in the second industrial revolution. And if we're not prepared for the second industrial revolution, then where are we going to be in the fourth industrial revolution? The industrial revolution that is going to largely depend on the internet. It's going to largely depend on technology, on the implementation, on investment in very expensive technologies. So these are things that we have to think about as we look at where is work going in our society. There are other things that are happening in our society at the same time. One of the terms that people might hear a lot these days is the gig economy, where what you're looking at is an erosion of permanent employment as opposed to short-term gigs, which would have come from the music industry, short-term employment structures, kind of like the day worker or the Uber driver who gets home, turns on the app and decides, okay, in a high-tech version of Pulling Bull, let me go make some money by driving some people around. You know, there are other versions of it. Airbnb is a very important part of that. And you see that we actually do have elements of the tourist industry in Trinidad and in Tobago that operate on the basis of Airbnb. I have friends who actually rent parts of their homes for Carnival on Airbnb. So what you're looking at is people moving into a kind of impermanent employment or impermanent income earning based on short stints of doing something with that they switch in and out of continuously. And that's becoming more and more a part of what the new economy is going to look like. But there are consequences for things like that. You know, one of the things about this is that what's new is old. You know, what's new has always been. Work has always been changing from the very beginning. Work changed from agrarian to industrial. An industrial will change from one stage to the next. So it's always going to continue to change. What has been happening of late, however, is that the balance of work has been changing drastically in several ways. For instance, all over the world, income has been frozen for most people who earn a salary for more than 20 years. What's happened all over the world is that work has intensified. What's happened all over the world is that as prices increase, people have to do multiple jobs to survive, and that's happening in Trinidad as we speak. One of the consequences of that is that people are losing any sense of what you can call work-life balance. I don't know if you have this experience, but I'm old enough to remember being able to go to school or go to work in daylight and to get home in daylight. And there are people that you meet today for whom that's not a reality. To get to work, they have to leave home in darkness. They get home in darkness. The only time they see their homes is on the weekends. And some people, only because of COVID, are only now discovering their children. Yeah, that's weird. That's a drastic shift about how we live as a consequence of how we work. And one of the most interesting things that I'm seeing on the news today, coming out of the United States of America, given COVID, is that a lot of people have decided we ain't going back to work, at least not like that. I'm not going to spend my life doing 2 or 3 dead-end jobs. That means that I can't see my home and my family. I'm not going to do $7 an hour jobs, where instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to improve myself and get a better job. And the people who are giving us $7 an hour jobs, well, keep it. And so a lot of people in the United States now are complaining that people don't want to come back to work. They're lazy, they don't want to come back to work. And that's, well, you know, one of the constants in capitalism, blame the worker. I'm sorry for people who think that workers are lazy. I don't happen to believe that. Context determines a lot of things. And so a lot of people, like I say, are deciding, no, I'm opting out of the system. It's not the first time. During the 60s and 70s, a lot of people chose to opt out of the system, a system that was and continues to be exploitative. I always remember Ras Shorty going up into the forest to live, because if the system is exploitative and destroying your life, why do you stay in it? And so what's important about that is the recognition that work doesn't always change in one direction. And interestingly enough, COVID has created the conditions in which people are now attempting to reverse some of the changes in work And if they are able to reverse some of those changes in work, then they're going to change the possibilities of life in their societies. And one of the other things that we have to remember is that technology is always a choice. There's no imperative in any productive system or capitalism that says you must use the newest technologies available in the world today. And there's actually a very real reason why that can't happen. And that is that technology costs money. It's expensive to buy new technology. It's expensive to implement new technology. And if you do that, you need to have the money to do that. So a lot of people have to choose, have to make a choice. What technology do I combine with human capital? Not a term that I like, but for lack of a better concept, let's use it today. With human resources. Do I use newest technology that displays a whole lot of people, or do I use more people and older technology? And it's very instructive that the same companies that use clean rooms in the industrial West to produce technology, to produce products like computers, will go to Pakistan, India, Indonesia, China, and use sweatshops to produce the same goods. Because at the end of the day, if I can produce it cheap, then I can sell it and make more money. And the richest man or at least at one point in time before he started divorce proceedings, Jeff Bezos became the richest man in the world in Amazon by treating workers as disposable, paying them nearly nothing, working them to the point where they would want to leave, because the business model was, when they leave, we find somebody else that we can work like that for 6 months, a year, and when they leave, we do it again. And now what's happening is that Amazon is discovering that they are running through the market of people who are prepared to work like that so quickly that in no time at all, there won't be anybody else willing to work like that. And then where are you going to find your workforce? So it's really interesting to look at some of these issues, because a lot of the ideas of the fourth industrial revolution are going to push us to a point where we have to start asking the question, what is good for our society? Not what is the most up-to-date technology, but is that up-to-date technology good for our society, particularly in terms of the human cost that it will have? Is that good for our community? Is that good for our businesses? Is that good for individuals? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a technophobe. I'm not very good at technology, but I'm not a technophobe. Technology will be used, it will advance, and what technology always involves is the creation of new kinds of work. So as we introduce and institute new kinds of technologies, one of the things that we always have to consider is how do we upskill, reskill, and redeploy workers in a changed work environment as well. So the issues are numerous, and the issues are fantastic, and all of these things have to be studied, not just as a phenomenon in and of itself, but because of the impact that it has on lives of people in a society. Let's look at perhaps the biggest contemporary issue today, the thing that keeps on giving, COVID. So the COVID-19 pandemic has done a very interesting thing. It has exposed all of the weaknesses, all of the fractures, all of the fissures in our social arrangements. It has exposed all of the people who are vulnerable in our society. And in this natural disaster of a global health pandemic, what you see is that in almost a month's time, a lot of people were on the breadline, and a lot of people more than a year later are still trying to figure out, how do I take care of myself? How do I feed my family? And as we pursue the interests of public health, what we have is a situation where a lot of people are being just as challenged by the public health issue and by the issues of earning an income. So what are some of the things that COVID has brought to the fore? One of the most important things for me is economic opportunity. We live in a society where our economy has been structured since, quite frankly, slavery, in such a way that it has never created enough employment opportunities for everyone in this society. And that means that you are always going to have a lot of people on the fringe of formal employment. The consequence of that is we have a culture of hustlers. Always have, and quite frankly, we always will. I remember when the hustler was personified by higglers. If you remember, before it burned down, the People's Mall in Port of Spain, the suitcase traders, the people who will travel to New York, fill their suitcases, come back and go sell on the streets, sell out of the car booth, who opened up those little shops and sold goods that were almost better than the selections that you would find in a mall, and sometimes at better prices that you would find in a mall. And so, like, they were never without customers. That was one of the first big expressions of the informal economy. My personal favorite expression of the informal economy was the maxi taxi culture, where you had people taking VSEP and opting out of formal employment and filling the gap in public transportation. And I mean, the thing was beautiful to see, to look at it mushroom, because all of a sudden you had a whole set of maxis running to places that no buses or taxis were running to. Then inside of that, you had conductors. And I mean, these guys would swing out to the maxi and jump back into the maxi, and the competition to fill the bus was incredible. You add to them the touts, and well, okay, that was probably one of the more unseemly parts of the culture, but they were interesting as well. And then came the vanguards, all of the guys who would paint these beautiful murals on the outside and on the inside of the buses, because ain't nobody going into a bus if the bus ugly. And then Big Pong come, because if you couldn't hear the maxi coming around the corner from like half a mile away, no school children going inside of that. And that folded seamlessly into the DJ industry. All of those guys who made their money making mixtapes. So I remember them, yes, we used to buy all the mixtapes. As soon as they dropped hot in a record shop, you had to go and buy your tape and you know, pound your I mean, that's where I heard Super Cat for the first time. Yes, I'm old, I don't care. Super Cat was great. All right. And you know, Rennie B and a lot of these guys, they ended up in the United States, you know, powering the Caribbean music industry up in the United States of America. And customization, and these guys put TVs in the maxis. Unfortunately, they used them to show blues late at night, but that was about getting customers. And then the state came down on them, and crushed them, but still you have vestiges of them, and it created a lot of wealth in that period of time, you know. But what it was reflective of if there isn't formal economic opportunity, then you need to make it for yourself. And this remains one of the challenges that we face today. And that's why you have such a large informal sector in our society, which from time to time will employ as much as 30% of our economy, of our workforce. And that is a good thing because it's entrepreneurial, but it's also kind of like indicative of a bad thing because a lot of these people aren't paying taxes. That has implications for the state. And also it means that, you know, there are these fragilities in our society because social protection just will not cover this area of the economy. And that's important because look at, this is what is happening with COVID. You have a lot of people outside there, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people got sent home with no income. How do we take care of them? When a company tells you, I'm letting you go for 3 months and I won't be paying you, what do you do? How do you feed your children? How do you pay your rent? What do you do? And then you're told that you have all of these restrictions on movement and, you know, you have to be disciplined and not, well, I won't say the term because I really don't like that term about the scene. But when you have people who have no income but bills to pay, then you're creating the conditions under which a lot of people get desperate. And then desperate and a public health crisis just aren't good things to have happening at the same time. So social protection is important, and social protection can't be temporary grants. They have to be much more than that. They have to be more comprehensive than that. They have to be more permanent than that, because there are permanent issues that people are faced with. And so we have to figure out, how do we protect members of our society who fall out of the society from time to time, and in particular, who become very vulnerable in the case of something like a national disaster. And well, one of the things on everybody's mind today is vaccination. I mean, we have a lot of discussion now about mandatory vaccination. What do we do about that? It's a public health crisis. People are getting COVID all over the place. People are dying. Is it not therefore important to tell people in the workplace, you have to take the vaccine? Now, this is a topic that I've been giving a lot of discussion, a lot of thought about. I've had a lot of discussion with other people about it myself. And full disclosure, I intend to get the vaccine as soon as I can. I haven't yet, and maybe that's because I'm a little bit lazy about it. But you know, I kind of have social anxiety, so I don't like being outside there with a lot of people. But the reality is that it is a virus and it is killing people. But the question becomes, if you mandate that I have to take a vaccine, then which vaccine do I have to take? Do I get to choose or do you choose? And in the context of the contemporary science, I mean, these are just some of the things that I'm wondering about. In the context of the contemporary science, if it turns out that some of these vaccines are harmful down the road, then who's liable for the harm that may be caused to me for taking a vaccine that was made mandatory? And if I don't want to take a vaccine, who has the right to override my personal decision not to take a vaccine? No, I don't have the answer to any of these questions. So I'm not advocating any position. And as I said upfront, I intend to take the vaccine myself. But these are not questions that we can just brush past. These are questions that we need to sit down and talk about. These are questions that require us to balance the rights of the individual against the rights of the society, or against the common good. And you know, I would hate to be somebody who has to be the one who makes that determination, because that's just not going to be easy. But as representatives of workers, trade unions have to get involved in this discussion, not just workers who are represented by a trade union, but working people, the working class as a whole. And, it is important that we seek the best decision that protects as much of the rights of people as is possible as we seek to protect the society as a whole as well. I would really like people to give their opinions on this point in particular. Like I said, I don't see any easy answers, and it's something that can only be worked out in terms of discussion and social dialogue. And the last point that I want to talk about in general, I'm sure some of you are getting quite tired of this discussion, is work and inequality. We come from a colonial origin that was based on incorporating a lot of people in the society, in the workforce of the society on the basis of slavery. And then the next set of people, the largest group of people to come in as workers came in as immigrant workers, and their conditions were a little better than that of slaves. Force, coercion has always been a part of the constitution of our society. The abridgment of the rights of people on the basis of race and class has always been an aspect of our society. And there are other forms of exclusions and inequalities that continue to exist in our society today. And these exclusions, these inequalities impact the quality of life in our society. One of the most important ones is gender inequality, where you still have situations where women in our society may earn as much as 1/3 less than men doing the same jobs, or in total. You still have situations in this society where the rights of women are not protected as vigorously as the rights of men are protected. And the most interesting part of that is that when women are vulnerable because of the disproportionate responsibility that women bear for family and for caregiving, it means that the disadvantage that women face get passed on to other groups. This is a picture there that captures the fact that the pay gap in the world is real, is substantial, and there's almost not a part of the world where women are paid as men. So this is a very, very, very real thing. And when this happens, again, you affect children and you affect the aged and the infirm. You affect people who have to be given care and who receive that care largely from women. And then understand this, COVID affected women disproportionately in relation to men. More women lost their jobs as a consequence of COVID, and more women lost income as a consequence of COVID. You add that to the fact that women do more work, and especially more unpaid work in societies than men. And I mean, the disadvantage that women face in societies are just staggering. And, this is very important to me because I come from a family that was intergenerationally led by women. The head of my family, despite the presence of men at one point in time, was my grandmother. And when she died, my mother became the head of my extended family. and that is replicated throughout the various cells of my family. And I would hazard to guess that many of you have shared that very same experience. So if we can't move towards greater levels of equality, particularly where women are involved, then it means that there's a whole section of our society who is disadvantaged, and there are people in our society who just cannot enjoy a full life, a fair life in our society. And of course, there are other forms of inequality. There are other forms of exclusions that are more contemporary in vintage, and that would include inequality of treatment for the differently able. You have inequality of treatment for revolving around sexual orientation. And one of the ones that is going to come out in the context of COVID, you're going to have mental health issues becoming important, and then we will be faced with the challenge of how do we deal with the mental health fallout of COVID in the workplace. And so these are some of the important issues in work today. It's in no way exhaustive, but these are some of the very important issues that become the meat, the core of labor studies, the core of our discussions in labor studies. And so what's the outcome? What are we trying to take away in these discussions? Well, we want to move towards ideas that allow work to become that thing which makes society better, and makes society better for all, not just for a few, but for all. And so we can look to some of the standards in work that are being established internationally that point to that. And so if you look at the ILO talks to us about decent work. And what is decent work? You will see some of the things that I've mentioned being repeated here in this picture. Decent work talks about secure employment, which would mean that you don't lose your job as soon as there's a shock in the economy. It would mean fair wages, which means that people are paid fairly in relation to the income of an organization, fairly in terms of equity between workers, both horizontally and vertically. You have the need for safe working conditions where people should not be afraid to die going to work. And that might sound like if it's hyperbole, but it's not. It's true, it's real. A lot of people die in the context of work, in going to work. A lot of people get ill in the context of going to work. And you'd be surprised at what kinds of work can be dangerous. Working on a computer can give you carpal tunnel syndrome, and I've experienced that, and that's painful, right? You need, as we said, social protection. We need labor rights and standards, and very importantly, we need to have open, fair, inclusive discussion between all of the stakeholders in society in terms of what constitutes proper work, because we have to establish certain kinds of values in our society, values that will protect everyone, values that will give everyone the chance, the opportunity to enjoy living in our society. Values such as social justice. We have to make social investment into our society. We have to not just make your money and then bank it in the metropolitan societies, but you have to plow money back into research and development, into technology, into social protection, into making opportunity in the society to make the society and the economy sustainable. We have to make investment, and this might sound a little silly to some people, but we have to make investment in arts, sports, and culture. Because life is not just about going to work in a factory and making things. Life is about making ourselves. Life is about, it also includes the ability to enjoy and discover yourself. It's about the ability to expand your horizons, and art and culture and sport are very important parts of discovering who we are. If you don't believe that, just look at Jamaicans, whose economy for so long has been worse than almost everywhere else other than Haiti in the Caribbean. But they have Bob Marley, they have Usain Bolt. And if you ask them, right, you know, that's an incredible thing. And that allows them to be Jamaican and to be proud of being Jamaican. One of the things that a lot of people say is that we aren't proud of being Trinidad and Tobagonian. I'm not too sure about that myself, but I think that there's a lot more that we can do. And a big part of that is like investment in these things that help us find expression of ourselves. And that allows us not to reduce the human experience to how much money you have in a bank account, what car you drive, what watch you have on your hand, and what's the brand on your electronics and your clothing. That's just too shallow. We have to make investment in youth. We have to make investment in technology. We have to make investment in women. We have to make investment in entrepreneurship, because all of these things are going to be required to improve the nature of our society, to improve the quality of our society, to improve opportunities for work, and to improve the opportunities for individuals and their families. And I think like that's about it for my presentation, my discussion. What I would like to suggest is that there are many programs that we do in labor studies that will allow you to explore some of these issues. We have our standard certificate and degree programs. We have our certificate in industrial relations. We have that leading into our associate degree in labor studies, which leads further into our bachelor degree in labor studies. And these things allow you to see the wide array of disciplines that allow us to understand how society, work, economy, life fit together, inclusive of industrial relations. But we also have an array of shorter programs as well. We have specialized training programs that allow us to focus in on smaller components, or focus in on components necessary in particular areas. Right now, for instance, we have two programs, two areas of programs that we are running in labor studies. We have our industrial relations in the pandemic era, which specifically addresses some of the problems and issues that workers and businesses face as a consequence of the global pandemic. And I want to be clear that in labor studies, we are not pro-labor and anti-business. Labor and business are in a symbiotic relationship. Labor cannot kill business because there's no value in that. Who's going to employ you? You know, so it's about finding that appropriate balance between proper employment, decent employment, safe employment, and good labor practices. We also right now have a very big focus on one of those important groups who are affected by the pandemic as well, and that is the protective services. These people who like many of the frontline workers in retail industries and in transportation, have no choice but to be out in the public in the pandemic. And I just want to acknowledge that one of my very good friends and students, Frankie Sami, who was a police officer, died recently of COVID. Shout out to Sami and his family. My condolences to the entire family and to all of his friends. But yeah, the protective services people are out there facing all of the normal industrial relations issues and the consequences of the pandemic as well. So we have programs that are addressing the issues that are that are characteristic of employment in the protective services. And we are also looking to create programs that will deal specifically with any group of workers and any industry, any organization that has specific needs. So I'd like to invite you, if you have an interest, any interest at all, to give us in the chat your email address. Tell us what you're interested in, and we will give you an information package on both our standard programs and our specialized training portfolio for you to take a look at and hopefully contact us with your needs. And that's it for me for the evening. Wow, 6:27. It went a long time, but. So I think with that, we can look and see if there are any questions that anyone might want to ask. And I can try to answer those questions for you. No questions so far. Yes, I do have a tendency to bludgeon people into submission. Very much like my good friend Martins Vidal. We get so long-winded and intense that it's a little hard for people to catch up. I'm being asked to announce the winner of the competition, which was, we were offering a free 10 Saturday program to the first person who logged in, and that winner is Tesfa Daniel. And as far as I know, she is no relation to me, so this is not a hookup. So Tesfa Daniel, you are the winner of a free 10 Saturday program, and you can contact the college and we will speak to you about how you go about accessing that 10 Saturday program. And I think, well, that begins to sound like that's it. So if there are no questions, I apologize for the interruptions, thanks to Bruce Wayne, but he is my best friend and I can't live without him. So thank you for being with us this evening. I look forward to seeing you at some point in time and welcoming you to the Cipriani family. So take care, be safe. Remember, COVID is still out there. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you.